Hello, my name is Dirk Twine, and I'm speaking with Dr. Joel Wallach, the mineral doctor. Dr. Wallach is one of the foremost authorities on nutrition and its use in the prevention and reversal of diseases. Dr. Wallach and I will discuss the top 10 leading causes of death among African Americans. But before we begin, I would like Dr. Wallach to give us a brief biographical sketch and his philosophy on health and nutrition.
Well, thank you, Dirk. It's always good to spend some time with you. And just for your listeners, I think the thing that makes my view different on health is that I'm a veterinarian as well as a physician. And in veterinary medicine, we don't have a health insurance program for animals like we do people. And if we were to use a human health care system for livestock, for instance, it'd be sticker shock for you. Your hamburger would cost you $275 a pound just to pay for the health care. So we learned in the animal industry that we could keep the price of animal products, such as meat and dairy and poultry and eggs, down to where the average person could afford to eat them every day, simply by eliminating health care costs. That's such a profound statement, I'll repeat it. Simply by eliminating health care costs. And Dirk, we do that in animals with little nutritional formulas, and I'm sure you've seen these little alfalfa pellets for mice and rats and guinea pigs and hamsters and gerbils and rabbits and kibbles and bits for dogs, and there's sheep pellets and pig pellets and horse pellets and duck pellets and trout pellets and monkey pellets and chicken pellets. And the reason why they have the animal feeds in these little pelletized forms is so that every mouthful is biochemically perfect. The animal can't sort through and just eat only the sunflowers or the raisins. Every mouthful is going to be scientifically and perfectly biochemically complete. Now, we've been so successful over the last 75 years using this concept, Dirk. Even though we spent $100 billion, we've eliminated up to 900 different diseases in animals that still plague people. And as a veterinarian, it always seemed odd to me that we would be able to use this nutritional technology to eliminate these diseases in animals. Nobody was employing them in people. So I went back to school and in 1978 became a physician and began to use these veterinary nutritional formulas in my human patients. And I'm here to tell you that the concept of preventing and curing diseases in animals with nutritional formulas works exactly the same in people. Been doing it since 1978. Have not yet been able to get too many doctors involved. And so starting about 1978, I really began to lecture to the general public, and I really appreciate this opportunity to share this information with your listeners.
That is absolutely amazing to me, and I'm on the quest, I guess, that you are also in terms of trying to get this information out to the general public. As I said, we're going to discuss today the top 10 leading causes of death in the African American community. And let's get started with number one, heart disease.
Heart disease. Well, everybody has one heart, and that's the problem. You know, you have two kidneys, and liver regenerates very well, and you have two eyes, but you only have one heart, and so you have to take very good care of it. And all of the diseases that plague the heart are nutritional deficiency diseases. Again, that's a very profound statement. All of the diseases that plague the heart are actually nutritional deficiency diseases. They're not genetic. Even when a baby is born with a heart defect, that was caused by a nutritional deficiency early in pregnancy when the embryo's heart was forming. And the mother was missing something, maybe zinc or vitamin A or selenium or copper. And these are very important micronutrients for the heart as it's forming, all through the development of the embryo. And so when a baby is born with a heart defect, it's because the mother was missing something during pregnancy. Now, if the baby's born with a perfect heart and they don't get all the nutrients they need from birth, it doesn't take long for that heart to start breaking down. And it's really tragic to have a baby who's born normal and then feed them on nothing but apple juice and oatmeal and wonder why by the time they're 6 years old they have heart problems, and heart murmurs and heart defects and so forth. And once you get to be a teenager or a young adult and you're participating in athletics and you're sweating out nutrients and not replacing them by supplementation, it's very, very simple to wind up with a sudden death situation, as very frequently happens in athletes. Then when you get into the middle age, if you're not supplementing properly and you're eating typically, as the African Americans do in the southeastern 1/3 of the United States, we're eating a lot of fried foods with free radicals that damage the lining of the arteries. You wind up getting atherosclerosis, arteriosclerosis. You get those coronary artery blockages. and it's very, very simple to wind up with a heart attack, even though you began with a normal heart. It has nothing to do with cholesterol. It has to do with free radical damage to the lining of the arteries of the heart and the brain and the larger arteries of the chest and belly cavity. And if you don't protect yourself with antioxidants and all the known essential nutrients that are required by the heart, you can wind up dead even though you're doing everything else right. You might be exercising and think you're eating right, but if you're not supplementing properly, you can wind up with all kinds of heart problems. For instance, stroke. Cardiovascular problem is listed as part of that cardiovascular disease. Actually, cardiovascular disease may be 25 different diseases, but stroke is certainly listed as one of the top ones. It can disable you or kill you, and is very prevalent in the African American community. A blood clot or thrombosis type of stroke is actually caused by an omega-3 essential fatty acid deficiency. If you don't have enough omega-3s in your diet, and it should be about 3% of your total calories, if you have a ratio problem between the omega-3s and 6s, and you should have 3 times as many omega-3s as you have omega-6s in your diet, you need to expect a thrombosis or a blood clot type of stroke. But you can also get a coronary thrombosis or a blood clot in a coronary artery, which can cause a disabling or life-threatening heart attack. You can wind up with a deep vein thrombosis in the legs, pulmonary embolism, which are blood clots in the pulmonary veins, all of which are life-threatening. And simply by supplementing with the proper amount of the omega-3 essential fatty acids, you can avoid all that. Then there's ruptured aneurysms, where you have a bleeding type of stroke, or maybe a ruptured coronary artery aneurysm, or a aneurysm of the aorta, pulmonary artery, or iliac arteries. You can bleed to death in seconds, like you've been stabbed or shot through those arteries, and this all occurs as a result of a copper deficiency. You can wind up, for instance, with a potassium deficiency and have arrhythmias and palpitations where you feel like your heart's jumping out of your chest. You can even drink too much water, Dirk, and wind up diluting the sodium and potassium in your body and wind up with what's called hyponatremia and hypokalemia. And this can kill you because your heart will stop if you drink too much water. And so it takes a little bit of education on each person's part to protect their heart and avoid all these unnecessary deaths. 99.9% of all heart attacks, 99% of all strokes, and 99% of all cardiovascular disease is totally avoidable by proper supplementation and avoiding free radical consumption. The biggest source of the free radicals, of course, is through fried foods and margarines and cooking oils and burnt meats.
So let me make it pretty clear to everyone. You're talking about heart disease and the prevention of heart disease and possibly even the reversal of heart disease by eliminating free radicals from the diet.
That is correct. And I want to throw one more thing in here, Dirk. I didn't mention it, but cardiomyopathy heart disease is a very important heart disease. Sometimes you survive, but then they have to put in a pacemaker or put you on all kinds of drugs to control the rhythm of the heart. Many times you die suddenly from a cardiomyopathy heart attack, and this certainly afflicts a lot of athletes. 75,000 to 100,000 young athletes die every year under the age of 35 while they're exercising. And one of the most common causes of sudden death in young athletes is cardiomyopathy heart attack. It's very common throughout the African American community, and it's caused by a high intake of, again, fried foods and vegetable oils, burnt meats, common sources of free radicals, and a deficiency of the trace mineral called selenium. And these are things that you have to pay attention to. You cannot guarantee you're going to get them out of your food. And as a result, if you don't consciously supplement with them, every morning when you wake up, you're putting yourself at risk. You're kind of throwing the dice every morning. Am I going to die from a cardiomyopathy heart attack? Am I going to die of a stroke? Am I going to die of a ruptured aneurysm? If you're not consciously supplementing, you're at risk for those things every morning when you wake up.
So the traditional Southern diet of the fried chicken and the sausage biscuit in the morning and those kinds of things are very bad for us in general.
Absolutely. And Dirk, here's a statistic that was actually put out in 1997 by the Harvard School of Public Health. It was a big article, color article. They went county by county in the United States. The people in the southeastern United States, running from, say, Washington, D.C. down to eastern Texas, everything southeast of that line, have a lifespan that's 20 years shorter than the people in the upper Midwest in the United States. It's not genetic, has nothing to do with being African American, but the people in the upper Midwestern part of the United States eat most of their food stewed, roasted, boiled, and poached whereas people southeast of that line between Washington, D.C. and East Texas primarily eat fried foods: fried chicken, fried fish, fried tomatoes, fried okra, fried hush puppies, fried potatoes, fried rice, fried water, and everything is fried. It's kind of a cultural thing, and this is why their lifespan is 20 years shorter. Below this line is known amongst doctors as the heart attack, stroke, and cancer belt of America. And I was in Jackson, Mississippi just a couple of days ago, and they actually have one doctor per 3 people, and they were asking me why Jackson, Mississippi, just little old Jackson, Mississippi, has less than 2 million people in that city. It's the biggest city in Mississippi. Why there's one doctor per 3 people. And that's because they are so sick there that it's kind of like when you have a house that's breaking down, the termites will infest it.
Right.
So the doctors are going there because they know everybody in Jackson, Mississippi eats a traditional Southern diet, and they have an extremely high rate of cancer, heart disease, and stroke.
So it's so important that we avoid the fried foods. We also need to avoid the vegetable oils, or it doesn't really matter what type of oil you're using for frying. They're all bad for you.
That's right. The vegetable oils, Dirk, are like communists. There's no good communists. Right. There's no good vegetable oils. The only vegetable oils that I would take certainly are the ones that are at least 72 to 75% omega-3s. For instance, corn oil is only 7% omega-3s, whereas the flaxseed oil is 72 to 75% omega-3s. The fish oils from cold water fish are 72 to 75% omega-3s. The only thing you have to watch is I prefer that people consume these essential oils in a capsule that's been flooded with nitrogen to prevent them from oxidizing, as opposed to using bulk sources. If they use bulk sources, from the moment that oil's been squeezed out of the original material, whether it's fish or olive oil or soy oil or canola oil, doesn't matter, it begins to oxidize. And even if you put it in the freezer, it slows the process down but doesn't stop it completely. And so before you're done with that bottle of bulk oil, you're consuming mostly free radicals. Whereas in the capsules that have been flooded with nitrogen to flush out the oxygen, there's no oxygen there, so the oxidation process does not occur.
There's been such a craze for this olive oil lately. Now, most recently, as you know, I own a health food store. There's been some talk about using things like avocado oil, and it's a better oil than olive oil even. Is there any truth to that?
Well, there's certain oils like peanut oil, avocado oil, and olive oil, which are different than the polyunsaturated oils. They have usually 1 or 2 open bonds or double bonds in them, and they're less likely to cause damage when you cook with them. But you notice I say less likely, not completely 100% safe. And there's really, again, no good oils when you use them for salad dressings, when you use them for cooking. They're just not safe. Human beings didn't have any contact with vegetable oils for cooking until about the 1940s. Margarine didn't come online until the 1940s, and that's when our lifespan began to fall. It's a shame, since people were told or instructed or ordered to give up cooking shortening or fats from chicken fat and lard and butter. And the doctors insisted that people who go to margarines and cooking oils, we've had epidemics of heart disease, we have epidemics of stroke, we have epidemics of every disease you can think of, because these sources of fat from vegetables are in fact more likely to produce free radicals. The safest fat for cooking is actually butter, because the carbon chains are only 4 carbons long, or 6 or 8 carbons long, and there's no unsaturated bonds in there. And so that's why butter can sit around for a long time and not go rancid or spoil. And if you cook in butter with low temperatures, it cannot hurt you.
Okay. Well, let's go to the next one, Doc. Let's talk about cancer.
Okay. Well, cancer is one of my favorite subjects, Dirk, because we've known for hundreds of years how to prevent, and in many cases reverse, cancer. And again, cancer was not an epidemic in Americans, especially African Americans, until they began to utilize margarines and fried foods and cooking oils, because of the free radicals actually increase your risk of cancer significantly. If you eat fat, you can eat 50% of your calories as fat, and it will not increase your risk of cancer. There was a big study by the Harvard Nurses Health Study, 90,000 nurses over a 20-year period, They found out by comparing the rate of cancer in these women who consumed 50% of their calories as fat versus those who consumed less than 20% of their calories as fat, there was no difference in the rate of cancer. Well, the University of South Carolina, a couple of years later, did a study on how you cook the fat and how it affected cancer. What they found out was if you eat meat cooked medium rare, on the medium rare side of medium, you reduce your risk of cancer, breast and prostate and colon cancer by 462%. If you ate the amount of burnt fat each day that would fill a sewing thimble, we were talking about just a couple of grams of this, because of the very dangerous free radical called heterocyclic amines that's produced by burning animal fat, it increases your risk of breast and prostate and colon cancer by 462%. So you can really eat fat with impunity as long as it's not burnt, as long as it's not brown. If you eat animal fat that's still white or has a maybe slightly yellowish cast to it, like in chicken fat or fat that comes from certain types of cattle, you'll find that your risk of cancer is not increased at all. Then if you throw in antioxidants, which are the protectors of everything from the lining of your arteries to your risk of cancer, your brain, your eyes, on top of the essential nutrients. And I think antioxidants are going to be a fifth category of essential nutrients, along with the vitamins and minerals and amino acids and fatty acids. I think the fifth and the newest category is going to be these antioxidants, because they do protect the lining of the arteries from getting plugged, and they also reduce your risk of cancer significantly. For instance, the antioxidants, selenium, a trace mineral, can actually reduce your risk of prostate cancer by 69%. This was a big study of 1,300 people at the University of Arizona very recently. In a study, again, of the Harvard Nurses Health Study, 90,000 nurses over a 15-year period, they found that just a good multiple vitamin that contains selenium and folic acid and other antioxidants and nutrients could reduce your risk of colon cancer by 75%. There's no drugs, Dirk, that will reduce your risk of any type of cancer by 1%. And so I was really disappointed when the medical community didn't get into the African American community and say, hey, if you take a good multiple, if you avoid fried foods, you're going to reduce your risk of cancer somewhere between 69% and 462%. And people are foolish not to do that.
One of the things that I've seen is that the statistics are so much higher in the African American community. So you're basically telling me that because of the way that African Americans prepare their food seems to be one of the greatest issues. They're creating a lot of free radicals in their bodies by eating a certain way. When you hear statistics like African American men are twice as likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer as white men.
Yeah, it tells you the story, and it's not genetic. Doctors want to tell African Americans that it's genetic. They say, look, this is genetic. And, you know, because you're a black man, you're doomed to get this. That's not true. There was a wonderful study that was done and reported in the February 1999 issue of Scientific American, where they went to Nigeria and they studied high blood pressure in people living out in the bush in a very primitive state. And what they found was that people living out in the bush in Nigeria had no experience with blood pressure cuffs. I mean, they had never seen one and didn't even know what hypertension meant. They found that only 7% of the people living in the bush in Nigeria had high blood pressure. They came back to the United States and did a lot of DNA testing and found a large group of people whose ancestors had originated in Nigeria. And they had a rate of high blood pressure was 33%. And they could say immediately that it wasn't genetic, because it was genetic to be 7% and 7%. Well, what was the difference between the Nigerians living out in the bush in Nigeria and the people whose ancestors were Nigerian who lived in Chicago? Well, the ones in Chicago were living on French fries and soft drinks, and the ones in the bush were putting minerals into their food every day and putting these minerals into their gardens. And their source of minerals was the wood ashes from their heating and cooking fires, and wood ashes are the minerals that are left when you burn away the carbon in the wood. And what we found out was that the people all over the world, whether it was Africa or Asia or Europe or North America or South America, since before recorded history, these people were using wood ashes as a source of minerals.
It's very interesting. I've seen the study that you're talking about, and I noticed that all of the countries throughout the world in that study on the high blood pressure and their descendants, that the U.S. had the highest percentage of people with high blood pressure among all of the countries, even the third world countries. Why do you think that is?
Well, again, Dirk, I think people in the third world countries are still supplementing with minerals. They're still putting the wood ashes, which are the minerals that are left when you burn away the carbon in the wood, into their food. It's called culinary ashes. They cut their salt with it because salt is valuable. They'll cut their salt with wood ashes, 10 parts wood ashes to 1 part salt, or 100 parts wood ashes to 1 part salt. And they mix that all up, and they put that on their food instead of just straight salt. And they're getting a lot of major minerals and trace minerals from those wood ashes as the tree kind of pulled it up out of the soil. And the same thing is true with cancer. Why do the African American men, going back to the original question, have a 100% higher rate of prostate cancer than white men? And that is because they eat fried foods, and they don't have a supplement culture. And it's kind of an education process to bring the concept of supplementation into the culture. Now, back when the black man was a slave in the United States, they were putting these wood ashes from their heating and cooking fires into their garden. They were mixing it with their food. They were cutting their salt with it. Once we got electricity and natural gas and propane for cooking and heating, there's no more wood ashes left over. And so they don't have that supplement source of these trace minerals and major minerals. As a result, they gave up that protection without putting any other supplement back into their life. And so we have to re-educate everyone in America, especially African Americans, to supplement properly, get all the known essential nutrients, the 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 essential amino acids, 3 essential fatty acids, err on the side of excess with these antioxidants, and we can eliminate a lot of diseases in the African American community in 90 days, including high blood pressure. That's one that's easily eliminated. It's a straight mineral deficiency disease. It's not a genetic thing, although doctors will tell you that. Again, it's the way that African Americans eat. Soul food does not have all the nutrients in it you need. May have many years ago, but not now, because plants cannot manufacture minerals, and farmers don't put enough minerals back in the soil anymore because they can get their maximum yields in terms of tons and bushels per acre simply by using 3 elements in their fertilizer, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And they're growing 100 acres or 1,000 acres or 5,000 acres of pinto beans, or red beans, or a dookie beans, right? Mm-hmm. You're looking at beans that don't have nearly the minerals in them because the beans don't need them. We need 60 minerals, but the beans will get along on 2 minerals and nitrogen. And so you can't tell when a dookie bean is deficient in selenium because the bean doesn't need the selenium.
Very interesting. So, in theory, we're supposed to get all of our minerals from our plants, but because of, I guess, the farming methods that we have adopted over the last, say 100 years, we've been unable to, and because we're not eating it, we're getting all these mineral deficiency diseases.
Well, to show you how important that wood ashes were for fertilizer, the first U.S. patent number 1, in the 1700s was for wood ash production. It was a process to burn trees, maximize the collection of the wood ashes, and they actually manufactured them to send the wood ashes to England for fertilizer and mix them with their food. That was the first U.S. patent, number 1.
That is absolutely amazing.
That was so how important that was. And, of course, again, I'll tell you the exact moment. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, in 1882 is when our troubles began, because we began to replace at that moment electricity and propane and natural gas for the wood ashes we were using as fertilizer. Of course, we were using wood as fuel for thousands of years. But once Thomas Edison pulled that switch on the first commercial electric generating plant on Pearl Street, New York, overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge, we were in trouble because nobody knew to replace those wood ashes we were giving up, which had been our source of minerals for thousands of years. I'm sure you've heard this in your work. People say, come on, Dirk, what did people do 100 years ago for a supplement? People didn't take vitamins, mineral supplements. Yes, they did. They took supplements back then as in the form of wood ashes.
Let's move on to the next thing, stroke. We've addressed it briefly already, and when we were talking about heart disease. Would there be anything else you'd like to say about that,
Well,
Doc?
just briefly, just to kind of consolidate the information on stroke, Dirk, there's 2 types of stroke. The predominant one, about 80% of strokes, is the blood clot or thrombosis type of stroke. And again, this is caused by an omega-3 essential fatty acid deficiency or a ratio problem between omega-3s and 6s. And this is because one of the more sinister internal effects that happen when you have an omega-3 essential fatty acid deficiency is your platelets get abnormally sticky. There's lots of things that will make your risk higher. Young women who are on birth control pills, and if you're deficient in omega-3s and you're taking birth control pills, you have a very high risk of getting a stroke or a blood clot. If you're a woman in your middle age and you're taking HRT, hormone replacement therapies of any kind, and you're deficient in omega-3s, you're at high risk. If you're exercising and you're deficient in omega-3s, you're at high risk. The second type of stroke is the bleeding type of stroke, which can be disabling or actually life-threatening, is a bleeding type of stroke, and this is caused by a copper deficiency, which results in ruptured aneurysms, because you get a breakdown of the elastic fibers in the walls of the arteries. And so you can get two different types of stroke. Again, the African-American man and woman both have a very high rate compared to the white population because they do not have a culture of supplementing with nutrients, and they do not have a culture of avoiding fried foods, which is something we have to change.
There's something else that I've read. We do know that smoking and other tobacco use contributes to diseases such as coronary heart disease and stroke. What's your thought on that?
Well, certainly smoking is a source of free radicals. And anytime you do anything, whether it's eating fried foods, cooking with vegetable oils, eating burnt animal fats, or smoking, all of these practices contribute to the production of free radicals in the body. And, you see people who smoke a lot, they tend to have a lot of wrinkles in their skin. They tend to have white hair at a younger age. They tend to have all kinds of disabling diseases because of the free radicals that are generated by that burning tobacco. And so, again, it comes down to choices. And if people want to lower their risk significantly, anywhere from 69% to 462%, they can lower the risk of cancer and almost eliminate the risk of stroke. They can eliminate it. They can run that down to zero by eliminating free radicals, supplementing with all the known essential nutrients and the antioxidants. And it's just a matter of being aware of what you're doing. Just like you protect your car, you maintain it, just like you maintain your home, you have to maintain your body.
Okay. Well, the next thing on our list is accidents that may not be directly related to nutrition, but could play a role in our everyday lives.
I think it is indirectly related to nutrition, Dirk, because people who have poor nutrition don't take in all the known essential nutrients, are eating lots of sugar. They can go to sleep at the wheel. It's called narcolepsy and have an accident. They can get drowsy up on the roof and fall off the roof. They can have narcolepsy, hypoglycemia. These are all nutritional deficiency problems. They can become very clumsy when they're missing certain nutrients. They can get neuropathies and lose the coordination and feeling they need over time to be stable on a ladder or use power tools and so forth. Just falling down the steps at home, car accidents. All of these can be related to what you're eating, what you're not eating, and what you're supplementing with or not supplementing with. And hyperactivity has to do with too much sugar. If you're hyperactive, you're not paying attention to what's going on around you, you can get in a car accident. You can fall down the steps. You can trip on the rug because you're so hyperactive, because you're living on sugar and not taking the nutrients to counterbalance that. We need chromium and vanadium specifically to deal with sugar. Lithium deficiency, which we're going to talk about more later in another subject, is certainly a very dangerous thing and can contribute to accidents. And so it's very important, just in summary, to avoid sugar and to supplement with all the known essential nutrients. Of course, another form of sugar is alcohol, which contributes to accidents. Addictive behavior, alcohol, drugs, smoking are all related to nutritional deficiencies because people, when they have nutritional deficiencies, have cravings. And when they have cravings, if they try things that are addictive, they're going to become addicted to them, like tobacco and drugs and alcohol. Fortunately, when I was a kid, I lived 80 miles from St. Louis, and so we didn't have the ability to get access to alcohol or drugs or tobacco. So if road tar was addictive, I'd be the worst road tar addict there is because that's what I used to chew. As a kid, that's all I had available to me.
Okay, let's go to the next thing, diabetes. It's a tremendous burden in the African-American community. African-Americans have a rate of diabetes of 33 per 100,000 compared to a rate of just 23.2 in whites. Why is that, Doc?
Well, there's two types of diabetes. 85 to 90% of diabetes is what we call adult onset type 2 diabetes. It's also referred to as insulin-resistant diabetes, and that's because both whites and African Americans make more insulin when they're adult onset type 2 diabetic than the non-diabetic. It's not an insulin problem. It turns out it's a deficiency disease of two trace minerals, chromium and vanadium, and 23 cofactors necessary for those two trace minerals to work properly. And it's a deficiency disease again. We can eliminate high blood pressure and adult onset type 2 diabetes in the African community in 90 days If everybody were just to supplement properly and eat properly, we can eliminate those diseases. They go back to normal life. But the medical community has the ear of the African American community say, look, you're going to die if you don't do what we tell you. You're going to die if you don't take this insulin. They never bring up the wonderful benefits you can get from a supplement program and changing your diet and exercising a little bit for diabetes. And the rate of diabetes in the African American community is going to go up. You're looking at 1 out of 3 by the year 2010. 1 out of 3 young people in the African American community are going to have diabetes. And the reason for this, Dirk, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, 100 years ago, Americans, including African Americans, were eating a half a pound of sugar per person per year. Today, 100 years later, it's a half a pound a day, 157 pounds per person per year, a half a pound a day. That's because people live on Pop-Tarts, Pillsbury toaster strudels, dry cereals, cooked cereals, instant cereals, soft drinks of all kinds. They live on sugar-cured sausage and ham and bacon and bologna and salami and pepperoni and jerky, all of which has lots of sugar in it. Because they're minerally deficient, they crave a lot of sugary things. Barbecue sauce, spaghetti sauce are hidden sources of sugar. Juices are a big thing now. A lot of people think they're doing a good job by avoiding soft drinks, and they live on apple juice and grape juice and Sunny Delight, which is only 2% juice and 98% sugar water, and they're pulling in lots of calories. And of course, obesity goes along with this diabetes thing. They're all signals that you're minerally deficient and your diet is incorrect. And so if you err on the side of excess when it comes to consuming protein, if you consume protein every 2 or 3 hours, small amounts, not enough to make you gain weight, but just even an ounce or 2 of protein every couple of hours, and you supplement properly and include the chromium and vanadium and the 23 cofactors necessary for them to work properly, we can eliminate adult onset type 2 diabetes, which makes up 90% of the diabetic population in African Americans. We can eliminate that in 90 days.
So when it comes to sugar, diabetics needs to avoid it completely.
Yes, in the beginning, while they're getting rehabilitated from their mineral standpoint, where they're getting their mineral stores built up in their body, it's best to avoid sugar, keep that blood sugar down. The normal morning blood sugar, fasting blood sugar should be 65 to 85. Doctors say, well, if you just stay below 140, that's good. Well, you're still going to wind up with amputations and going blind and shortening your life by 50%. If you keep your blood sugar below 140, you need to keep it below 100. And you have to be a little aggressive on avoiding the sugar, I'd say, for the first 6 months. Even if you get your blood sugar down to 85, man, you're in good shape. You're taking your supplements and you're feeling good and your neuropathies have gone away, which we knew that in 1977, that we could eliminate peripheral neuropathies in diabetics with just a supplement program. This was published in medical journals back in 1977. And the reason why doctors don't use this simple process of supplement and diet restriction of sugar, Dirk, is because doctors don't educate them. Doctors don't suggest it to them. And here's why. According to the GAO, which is the General Accounting Office, which is the budget watchdog for the U.S. Congress, they say that the average diabetic over the 25 to 40 years they live after diagnosis, they are worth to their medical doctor $750,000 if the medical doctor treats the African American the standard way that medical doctors treat diabetes. They're worth to the doctor $750,000. If the doctor tells them to take this supplement program and to avoid sugar, the doctor makes $20 for a copayment.
That's the end of diabetes. That's the end of the money.
That's the end of this income stream, right?
Right.
And there's no laws requiring doctors to cure people, Dirk. Even though there are cures available, there's no laws requiring doctors to cure people. And so when a doctor gets their choice, they're going to go to the $750,000 instead of the $20. And we'd like to believe in our heart of hearts that doctors are altruistic and they lay awake at night trying to figure out how to eliminate pain and suffering, disease and death and pestilence in Americans. But unfortunately, that's not true. It's just not true. It's very, very disheartening to realize that the majority of doctors, you can't say 100%, but the majority of doctors, I'd say more than 95%, are in the business of figuring out how to maximize their income and how to empty out your Medicare, Medicaid funds, your private insurance, and they believe the equity in your home is theirs. And they're going to work everything they can to get it. Well, you're younger and have these diseases, or when you go into a nursing home, they know somewhere along the line they're going to get all your assets. And I know we don't like to believe that, and people are going to be upset with me, but that's the reality.
So basically, diabetics need to eat a diet high in protein and green vegetables, avoiding sugars and
including fruit and juices.
including fruit and juices.
Yeah, now later on, when they have everything under control, this might be a month, this might be 3 months, they can kind of test and see if they have enough mineral reserves built up in their body which would protect them from sugar consumption. So say after 90 days, they got their blood sugar under control, they're not on medication anymore, everything's wonderful, they're eating right, they're supplementing right, have an apple. And then a half hour later and 2 hours later, check your blood sugar. And if it doesn't go up above 120 after eating that apple, you're in good shape. If it goes up to 180, you're in trouble still.
Yes.
And the same way, man, if you can eat, say, an apple 2-3 days a week, try a banana on another day. Try an orange. And then you might try, okay, I'm going to try some spaghetti. But you can't eat that stuff every meal. You should be restricted to 1 piece of fruit a day after you've gotten yourself under control and your diabetes is no longer a clinical problem. You're not on medication anymore. Here's where you can say, I can have 1 piece of fruit a day now. Man, this is really great. And if you exercise, I can have 2 pieces of fruit a day. And so after that 90 days, you should be able to figure out a system you're going to keep your fasting blood sugar below 100.
So people that have been told by their doctors to eliminate certain foods and exercise, and they've been able to get their blood sugars down, that is just a temporary fix. Even if they've been able to get off the medication, is that temporary?
Well, it's a temporary fix because they haven't reinstituted the mineral levels in their body. And so what they're doing is they're controlling their blood sugar with diet and exercise, but they have not solved the basic problem. And you're still going to be marching on towards amputations and blindness and peripheral neuropathies, maybe at a slower rate. Instead of getting it 10 years into diabetes, you might get it at 15 years into diabetes. And so you cannot depend solely on being good at controlling your sugar intake and exercising. That's not enough because you have not solved the systemic deficiency problem. We also know that deficiencies of chromium and vanadium will increase your risk of a heart attack, just absolute sudden death. And so there's more to it than just the blood sugar part. The blood sugar is just an indicator that you have this more sinister problem going on that we have to deal with. And so it's very superficial thinking that you have your diabetes under control by keeping your blood sugar down.
Let's move to the next topic, Doc. Homicide.
Homicide and violence occurs certainly in the hood, the black community, at a much higher rate than it does in white communities. And again, it comes down to deficiency diseases. There was a very interesting study that was done in Texas during the 1980s where they had certain towns that looked alike superficially, same demographics, same percentages of Hispanics and African Americans and whites in both the towns, same type of businesses, same type of fast food restaurants, economic levels the same, education was the same. But in one community, it had 3 times more violent crime, murder, armed robberies, assault, muggings, rape, and they couldn't figure out why. And then a very famous guy, Dr. Gerhard Strauser, started doing analyses of the water and the food, and what he found out was in the communities that had no violent crime, I mean 0, everybody's just nice church-going people, was they had a very high lithium level in their drinking water naturally. Doctors want you to believe that lithium is a prescription drug. Well, lithium is an essential trace mineral. The symptoms you get when you're deficient in lithium is a violent behavior. It affects you violently if you're deficient in lithium. Now you throw in a chromium and vanadium deficiency on top of a lithium deficiency, and you eat sugar, you're going to be a very violent person. A couple of things indicate this. You heard of that Twinkie defense in California when that guy walked into the courthouse and shot up the mayor and a bunch of other people. And he said, well, I get violent when I eat Twinkies. And he had a history of that. And so they let him off for a reason of temporary insanity because he ate Twinkies before he went into the courthouse. Well, the same thing is true with athletes, especially basketball players, because they have a very close relationship with the fans in a basketball court as opposed to a football stadium. And you see these basketball players get violent. They jump into the stands, start beating up on the fans and things, get into fights all the time amongst themselves. And these guys live on soft drinks for energy all the time because they're sweating. They have a high need for energy all through their sports events and their practices. And so they just live on sugar. They're on a sugar high all the time. And if they're deficient in lithium, chromium, and vanadium, they're consuming all this sugar, they're going to be violent. The same thing is true. I've talked with a lot of police officers who go to these calls where they're having domestic violence, where the husband's beating up on the wife or the wife's beating up on the husband or they're beating on the kids or whatever's going on, domestic violence of one type or another. And when the police officers come into the house, there's soft drinks sitting on the tables. We're not talking about alcohol and drugs all the time. The majority of time is soft drinks on the table. And if they're deficient, which the African American community tends to be, they're deficient in chromium, vanadium, and lithium, they're going to have a much higher rate of what I call a hair trigger. Any little thing will set violent behavior off, where if they were supplementing properly and not eating sugar, they would just shrug their shoulders, no big deal, you know. And so we have to get everything down to where it's no big deal, to where if you eyeball somebody, they're not going to attack you, to where if you say something that offends them, they say, hey, man, don't say that anymore, instead of attacking you with a hammer or a knife or a gun or something like that. And it comes down to supplementing properly and avoiding the sugar. Lithium, chromium, vanadium deficiencies, sugar intake is going to cause a problem.
Thank you. Let's move on to pneumonia and influenza.
Well, pneumonia and influenza is a very common cause of death in African Americans, especially older African Americans, because the immune system, Dirk, requires all 90 essential nutrients, just like muscle health and liver health and brain health and heart health requires all these essential nutrients. So does your immune system. People forget that. And if you're taking all the 90 essential nutrients, and again, avoiding the fried foods and vegetable oils, margarines, cooking oils, meat cooked well done, and burnt animal fats, avoiding alcohol, avoiding sugar, avoiding anything that's going to cause free radical damage to your body, and you're avoiding all these bad things, you're going to make sure that none of this happens. You can avoid this totally.
Okay. The next thing that we'd like to deal with is respiratory diseases.
Well, respiratory diseases, I'd kind of throw that in with the flu, because a lot of them are viral infections. And if you protect your immune system, you might be sick for 3 days, and just with a little bit of water and ramp up on your antioxidants like vitamin C and the antioxidants and juices and things like that, you can get things under control in just 3 to 5 days. But if you're not well nourished with supplements, all the known essential nutrients, if you're not well nourished with the antioxidants, the flu is going to get you. It's going to cause you to need to go into the hospital to get IVs and antibiotics and all that kind of stuff. And the same thing is true with respiratory disease. Now, there's one little variation on that. Respiratory diseases in African Americans, I would throw in asthma. They have an extreme rate, especially in younger kids. They have like 3 times the rate of asthma as the white community. And of course, I have to laugh all the time, Dirk. In the newspapers, they say, well, doctors say it's because of the cockroach hairs setting it off. I don't know if you've read that or not.
No, I've never seen that one.
But they do all these studies, and they say, oh, yeah, it's the cockroach hairs setting off the asthma in these homes. Well, that's kind of a joke, because it's not the cockroach hairs. It's the fact that these kids are deficient in several minerals, magnesium and manganese, and the essential fatty acids. Now, if they supplement properly with all the 90 essential nutrients, that's going to include magnesium and manganese and the essential fatty acids, and we could eliminate asthma in the African American community. There shouldn't be a single black child with asthma. If they get asthma, you should be able to get rid of it in a couple of weeks just by proper supplementation and changing their diet. It is so simple, Dirk, it's scary. Asthma is I wouldn't call it a simple nutritional deficiency disease. It's kind of a complicated one because it requires multiple deficiencies to get clinical asthma. But these multiple deficiencies occur in these young kids because they're living on apple juice, grape juice, they're living on Sunny D, they're living on soft drinks of various kinds, they're eating fried foods. That's the first finger food that an African American child gets. Cut up little 1/4-inch cubes of fried chicken and fried fish and fried potatoes. And this is why the rate of asthma is so high in these African American kids. It is not cockroach hairs.
What is it when we hear people talk about growing out of asthma? What is going on there?
Well, when kids grow out of asthma, it's because they've changed their diet. And just out of luck, they're eating things that have more essential fatty acids in them. Just out of luck, they might be eating more greens that have more magnesium in it. And so some will grow out of it if they're eating properly, but usually it comes back in later years if they're not supplementing properly. The same thing is true, and I might throw in here, growing pains. I have so many parents complain to me, he's 6 years old and he's got pains in his knees and his shoulders and his wrist, and the doctor examined him, says, oh, he's got growing pains, he'll outgrow them. To me, that doctor should be put in jail for reckless endangerment because that kid is minerally deficient. He should immediately get supplements, especially calcium, and the 28 cofactors, actually 89 cofactors necessary for that calcium to work properly. And if you do that, those growing pains will go away immediately, and he'll actually be taller and more fit and healthier by supplementing them. Why let that child suffer with growing pains, which is telling you their bones are not healthy because they're not getting the minerals and the other cofactors necessary for healthy bones? They're telling this child, hey, you're hurting because you need to give me something. I'm the bone talking now. You need to give me something here. Otherwise, I'm going to create pain to let you know I'm not healthy. And for a doctor to say, oh, he'll outgrow it, you just want to get very angry with that doctor and say, hey, I'm going someplace else because you're not treating this child right.
Let's go to the next one. This is a biggie, and a lot of this is in the news, HIV AIDS.
Well, HIV is a very interesting organism. It's a relatively new organism to the world population. I'm sure it kind of rose up and fell during the years in Africa where it started. They believe that it was a disease of primates or wild monkeys of some kind or another, and peoples there in Africa actually would kill the monkeys and eat them, and they finally got one. They didn't cook the food real well, and through that way got contaminated with the virus. And HIV is a controllable virus with a nutritional program. If you look at two great African-American athletes, one, of course, was the great tennis player, Arthur Ashe, right? He died, tragic death, terrible death. He was a miserable man the last couple of months of his life because his HIV had mutated into a very aggressive form of AIDS. You look by contrast to somebody like Magic Johnson, a great basketball player. He's probably 50 pounds overweight. He's a very aggressive businessman. He's enjoying his life. And he's lived longer than Arthur Ashe did with HIV. There's a little secret. There's this dirty little secret that doctors don't tell people. If you have HIV infection, they say to you, look, your salvation is through these drugs like AZT and DDI or whatever it is, all these various medications. And that's what they want the patient to do who has HIV. Where in fact, if they were to supplement with selenium alone, just supplement with selenium alone, that's where all the research is, just not a complete supplement program, but just selenium alone. It prevents that HIV from converting into the AIDS, and you can actually live with HIV forever. You can live to be 100 with HIV if you supplement with selenium. Now, what if you supplement with all the 90 essential nutrients? And I believe this is what Magic Johnson is doing. He looks too good for somebody who's taken the medications. If you look at people who take the medications that they typically give, again, AZT and DDI for AIDS, they're not well people. They look sick, and they don't feel good. May extend their life a year or so, but they're not well that last couple of years of their life. When you supplement with all these known essential nutrients, especially selenium, and you have to err on the side of excess here. A man as big as Magic Johnson, I'm sure he's taken at least a milligram, maybe 2 milligrams. It's 2,000 micrograms of selenium to keep that HIV virus from mutating into aggressive AIDS. The research, interestingly enough, was done by a great researcher out of the School of Pharmacy at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. Dr. Taylor is his name. And he's done this work for years and years and years, I think more than 20 years. There's just no doubt about it that you can prevent these terrible viruses like HIV and Ebola virus and many other viruses from mutating into their aggressive form. And so people don't have to die of AIDS. One other piece of information here, Dirk. There was a big study, which was a bad study from the standpoint of, I think it was an immoral study, because they already knew the answer. But once they did the study, you got to use the information. And this was a study in a little country, Malawi, in East Africa, near Lake Malawi. It used to be called in the old days, prior to the 1960s, during the colonial days, it was called Nyasaland. Now it's called Malawi. And they took a group of, it was 100 women who had HIV, and they were pregnant. They were all pregnant. And they gave half of them just 5,000 international units of vitamin A, which is the minimum daily requirement. And the other half they gave sugar pills to. Now, the ones that had sugar pills, they had like 30% of the babies born with HIV, natural birth. The ones that got the 5,000 international units of vitamin A, they had like 2% were born with HIV. So they cut it from 33% down to 2% just by giving those pregnant women 5,000 units of vitamin A.
One nutrient.
One nutrient. And so it's absolutely criminal for doctors not to educate everyone who has HIV and the general community out there about the benefit of these nutrients when you have any disease, especially diseases like HIV.
Thank you. Let's go on to the last topic, conditions originating in the perinatal period shortly before and after birth.
Well, again, Dirk, what the mother is consuming during her pregnancy, all through the pregnancy, especially in the first 3 months, the first trimester, will either prevent or eliminate or cause birth defects. According to the University of California, San Francisco, 1 out of 33 American babies is born with a physical birth defect. Now, that doesn't include autism and all the mental things that a baby can be born with. This includes only physical birth defects like cleft palate, cleft lip, clubbed hands and feet, heart defects of all kinds, liver defects and so on, brain defects, things like spinal bifida, all these neurological birth defects, Down syndrome. 1 out of 33 American babies is born with that. If you look at the animal industry, if you look at the laboratory animals and pet animals and farm animals that are fed nothing but a commercially prepared diet, what you're going to find is 1 out of 500,000 get a birth defect. So you see, we're just the supplement program can prevent birth defects very significantly. And this, again, we have to educate everybody, including the African American community. Look, if you're going to be sexually active, if you're in the childbearing years, you had better supplement properly. Otherwise, you have a very high risk of having these babies born with some kind of physical defect. Now, in the last couple of months of pregnancy, if the mother is deficient in essential fatty acids, this baby is going to be born retarded. This baby will be born with a very low IQ. And sometimes after the baby's born, that can be fixed by supplementing them properly. Sometimes it can't. Again, Dirk, in that last couple of months of pregnancy, we have got to make sure these pregnant ladies are getting the essential fatty acids, the omega-3s in the right place. They got to stay away from the fried foods and the margarines and the cooking oils, burnt animal fats, sugar, anything that's going to create free radicals to damage that child's brain. They got to supplement properly, especially the essential fatty acids, to keep that intelligence up, to keep the IQ up. And when the baby is born normal, this is really tragic, when the baby is born normal and then they are given a formula that only has 11 to 13 minerals in it, and we need 60. That baby's only getting 11 to 13 minerals. You know something bad is going to happen,
right?
Because they don't supplement with lithium, they don't supplement with chromium and vanadium. Many of the baby formulas don't supplement with selenium, chromium, vanadium, or lithium. And so we have to add this to the child's diet the day it's born. Can't wait till it's 6 years old, because all these bad things are happening with apple juice and grape juice and soft drinks when that child is young. And so we have to supplement them from the moment they're born if we're going to protect them. And by protecting that child, you're going to protect the community, okay, from violence, unnecessary violence. You're going to protect the community financially, because they're not going to have to financially support taking care of that child. And so it's economically important. For the safety of the community, it's important. Just for moral reasons, it's important. Since we have the knowledge, we have to protect these newborn children by supplementing with all the known essential nutrients. Just because it says on that can of formula that this formula has been approved by the American College of Pediatricians doesn't mean anything, because the pediatricians don't know anything about nutrition. And we have a real problem with these formulas. And so I like to see babies given a full supplement program, and that's the beauty of liquid supplements. You can mix it in with their formula from the day they're born.
Even worse than being sick and having various diseases, the rate of African American babies dying is twice as high as in European white Americans. So we're taking it to an even higher level in terms of the effect on the African American community.
Exactly. And again, these babies are born weaker because the mother has had a bad diet all through pregnancy. The mother hasn't been supplementing all through pregnancy. And so that child is born weak. Be undersized is a very common cause of early death in newborn babies, death in that first year. In fact, it's so bad that out of the entire world, I don't know, there's 190 nations now, out of the entire world, Dirk, the United States ranks 32 in first-year survivability of our babies. There's 31 other countries who do a better job of first-year survivability than America. And the low statistic is because of the very low rate of first-year survivability in the African American community. And so we can eliminate that problem just by making sure these young women get supplemented all through pregnancy. Before, they should start supplementing when they're in junior high school. They should start supplementing when they're born and just have all their body tissues loaded with these nutrients. And so when pregnancy does occur, that child is being formed in an environment of total nutrition. That child is being formed in an environment that's complete biochemically. When that baby's born, the mother should be educated that this baby needs all these 90 essential nutrients. If this baby's going to have the best possible life from an educational and a financial and a health basis. And we can do this. And again, I get so excited about this, Dirk, and I really appreciate you having this program so we can get the message out. We can eliminate high blood pressure, diabetes, arthritis, and osteoporosis, and birth defects in the African American community, I mean almost instantly. Certainly, high blood pressure, diabetes, and osteoporosis and arthritis, we can eliminate in 90 days. Birth defects, we have to go through a whole round of pregnancies. If somebody's pregnant now, we may not be able to fix it, but certainly the next pregnancy, we can eliminate birth defects. It's a matter of education and having high-quality supplement programs available for everybody.
Not to mention, it's going to add some other extra benefits in terms of elimination of PMS, possibly perimenopausal and those sort of symptoms as they get older. So many other benefits will come about for ladies when they use these supplements also, correct?
Oh, absolutely, and that goes towards the emotional problems we've talked about, goes towards the violence we've talked about. You know, a young woman who has PMS because she's deficient in all these nutrients, and you have the guy whose tendencies are towards violence over every little thing because he's deficient in these minerals and taking too much sugar, there's going to be a clash. There's going to be a problem, a serious problem. And this is totally avoidable by proper supplementation and totally avoidable by changing the diet to get rid of the sugar and the fried foods.
Okay, Doc, let's do a little summary here. Basically, we need all of the essential nutrients to avoid all diseases.
That's correct. And we're talking about 90 essential nutrients. I think this is very conservative, Dirk, because if you throw in the antioxidants, it'll be over 100 essential nutrients. But we need a minimum of 90 essential nutrients, maybe more than 100. This includes 60 essential minerals, maybe 70. We certainly need a minimum of 16 vitamins, 12 essential amino acids, 3 essential fatty acids. And again, as time goes on, there's going to be more added to this list. And without this, we have run up a bill now where it's $1.8 trillion a year. The medical system and its costs are bankrupting the government. It's pushing other programs off the government planning because we can't afford to pay for medical care and give money for orphans and give money for housing and give money for unwed mothers and give money to pay for lawyers for people who can't afford lawyers and things. And so it's really, really tragic that something we can eliminate like health problems, the cost of these health problems is causing the American government and the American people to go bankrupt. The cost of these healthcare problems, Dirk, are causing American companies to go outside the United States for manufacturing and IT jobs. I mean, we're losing millions of jobs a year to Mexico and India simply because they don't have the burden of healthcare benefits.
Okay. Lastly, let's talk about what things to avoid. We should take the essential nutrients, but we should also avoid some things. What are those?
We need to avoid sugar, alcohol, which is a type of liquid sugar, so I'll throw alcohol in here with sugar. If you want to have a glass of wine with dinner, that's fine. If you're well supplemented, a glass of wine with dinner is not going to hurt you. If you want to have a beer on a hot day while you're fishing or watching a football game, that's fine. As long as you're well supplemented, not going to hurt you. You're not going to drink a case of beer a day. You're not going to drink a whole bottle of wine if you're supplementing properly. So no sugar, a modest amount of alcohol, or none, better yet. And you need to avoid fried foods, margarines, cooking oils, meat cooked well done, burnt animal fats. I didn't stress it, but we need to avoid carbonated drinks, even the diet ones, because they neutralize stomach acid and certainly will result in a malabsorption of minerals, a maldigestion, especially of protein, a malabsorption of things like vitamin B12. You have to have stomach acid, and carbonated drinks dilute them. And by eliminating things out of our diet that create free radicals, which increases your risk of cancer and stroke and heart attack and macular degeneration and cataracts and blindness and diabetes, arthritis, osteoporosis, kidney disease, liver disease, gallbladder disease, by eliminating these things that create either directly or indirectly free radicals, we're going to add 20 healthful years to our life. It is very simple. It's not hard, but you have to consciously work at it.
All right. Thank you, Doc. I really appreciated this, and I hope that we can get this information out not only to the African American community, but to the entire United States and the world. Thank you.
Information and statements regarding dietary supplements discussed have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.